Hello, everyone. Just wanted to um, share a little bit of a reaction here. You can see on the screen, and it's posted publicly, so I don't think there's any problem like recording this. I don't know if I could be wrong. It's one thing if it's like it's not shared with everybody, so it's not made public. Um, so you have a quote here, and I know I've known Phil for a few years now, at least 3 years. Last I've seen him, we went to lunch. Probably I don't know, a year and a half ago. I don't don't remember. This whole year has been a blur. This past year, 2020, was a blur. It was sometime in 2019, I'm sure. We went to lunch, a Mexican place in Riverside, and we had a cordial conversation. We didn't very that's the thing. That's the interesting thing about the dynamics online versus in person. There isn't much. When you're looking at a person face to face and you're having conversation, I think you remember, and it's more apparent, it's more obvious. You're talking to a human being, a person who has all sorts of complicated history and you know socialization and the way they were raised and all that stuff. So I think we give a little bit more grace when we talk to people face to face, and it's true for me too. So I fall into this myself, but I think it's just something we need to be more aware of. But then when you go into online world, it's us and them, or it's me and the whole world against the whatever it is. So it's easy to just kind of get into these back and forths, and I'm guilty of it here, especially in this thread as well. But it's hard to avoid at times, especially when it's like you know the tone is offensive to some degree, and I'm not opposed to being able to be offensive, but if you post something offensive, you might get something offensive back. So I think that's just I prepare myself. I mean, I try not to post stuff that's offensive, but I can't control everyone's reactions to every little thing either I say or everything little thing that I have somewhat control over. Anyway, so we have a quote here posted. Those fears stayed with me. I would go shopping with my parents, and if I lost them in the store, I was sure that Christ had come back and I was left. I've never talked to anybody who felt so frightened, who felt so scared all the time. That's no way for a little girl to grow up. End quote. So that's the end of the quote. So then you have a sort of a commentary from the author, who is Phil here, where he says, when will 21st century society denounce these childhood teachings as no longer acceptable? Young parents can change this, leaving torturous historical myths behind. Excerpt from Leaving the Fold, Marlene Winnell. So you can look up that book on Google if you'd like. And then I've met Don Fuller. He's an interesting guy. I don't know what his background is. I know a little bit of his background, from what he shared in the events that I've attended. Clearly, there is, a very big axe to grind, or there's a chip on the shoulder. I don't know what it is, but every post I ever read from him is always angry and attacking of Christians. So clearly, there's sort of a deeply seated animosity, hatred, who knows what, and frankly, I don't care. I don't know him well enough to really care about what that's all about. I'll react when I can, or if I, feel moved. But he says this: filling kids' heads with Bible stories is child abuse. Last year, I finally did something I had wanted to do for years. I read the Bible from front to back, this particular one being King James Version that was printed in New York City in 1913 and was thus 107 years old, a real pulpit pounding Bible. And it was horrible. I was looking for the magical message, that golden moment that would tap my consciousness, and I would at least say, so that's what it's all about. But it never happened. Just doom and gloom with a smattering of absurd promises and prophecies, all overridden by the dark cloud of this absolutely despicable God the ancients had invented. To feed that dreck to kids is nothing short of child abuse. And you hear this pretty often. Child abuse. This is child abuse. I don't know. I'm not going to put words in Phil's mouth, but I've heard it often coming from sort of the atheist side, if you want to call it, if you want to divide it into sides, referring to religion, inculcating religion as child abuse. Well, okay, you're right to your opinion, I suppose. Um, my comment was she might have had other attachment issues also. And I don't know what this sad face is about, but for those who work in mental health, like, and don't have an axe to grind one way or the other, you're not imposing your religion or anti-religion or anything like that. This is a fair statement. Attachment issues, okay? The conclusion from this author, the author of this post, not this author, the quote, right? The author of this post is that this is representative, seemingly representative of religion in general. Whoever is listening to this, the five of you, and if you're religious, all five of you, or were religious, was this your experience of religion? I was an atheist I was an atheist for a few years. I never would have described this kind of situation here. So how many people grow up like this, right? Yeah, there's tons of people who grow up in sort of fundamentalist backgrounds. But is this what you experienced? Like, literally, every time you didn't see your parents at a store, you were fearful that they were raptured? There's something else going on here. And I don't know. I haven't read the whole book. But, I'm obviously, I haven't read any of the book. I'm obviously reacting to sort of the leap between this quote and this conclusion. So all I'm suggesting here is it religion? Or is it this particular dynamic between whoever the parents are and this child? And it could have nothing to do with religion, is my point. Anyway, so Phil says defensive much. I get it. I get why he says that. No, her report alone sounds like an insecure attachment, anxious type, for those who know attachment theory. Keep in mind here, I'll say this right up front. What I'm highlighting here, is not a diagnosis. Anybody who's worth their salt, you don't have to have a license at all. You don't have to be a psychiatrist, a therapist. This is not a diagnosis. Insecure attachment, anxious type, that is an attachment type. It's a theory, not a diagnosis. You're never going to find this phrase in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's just not in there. It's not in the DSM because it's not a diagnosis. All right. Anyway, so here's where I, fall into what I was saying earlier, but if it's useful for your support of anti-religion stance, whatever. I really don't care. I mean, I care, but I don't care. I don't care enough that I'm going to go into this lengthy discussion back and forth, proving anybody wrong. I mean, I'm just going to make my point and move on. So he wants me to read the book. And I say, okay, I'm not going to read the book. I mean, I have so many things that I'm more interested in. I don't really care about this person. I did look up this person, though, this author. Very interesting. Licensed psychologist somewhere else. Her degree is not in clinical psychology. It's in human development. So it must be sufficient to earn a license in psychology in, I think, Wisconsin or wherever she has a license. It shows on her LinkedIn that she lives in California. And I don't think that PhD degree is sufficient to be able to get a license in psychology to practice as a psychologist in the state of California. But who cares? Whatever. She has a PhD, so it's a legit PhD. She should generally know what she's talking about. But everybody's got biases. I have biases. She's got biases, I'm sure. Anyway, so this guy came out of nowhere. If you remember me posting about this guy, it's been a couple of years. It's been 2 or 3 years. This is the guy who totally was like, do you even know what you're talking about? Oh, you're just an adjunct professor of psychology. And as it turns out, it comes out that he's a licensed, I guess he's a licensed psychiatrist somewhere, wherever he is. It's not even his name, Larry Scott. It's probably more like Larry Scott or Lawrence Scott or whatever. Um, because he was correcting me back then. I said something like Sigmund Freud was the father of like modern psychiatry or psychiatry, and his point was, well, he's not a psychiatrist. He was a physician, but not a psychiatrist. And I said, yeah, but he's still known as the father of psychiatry. I mean, it was in the textbooks, and he was just like, he's like, oh, you don't know, they're there, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just a lowly adjunct, you're just an adjunct. And I'm just like, the nerve, like the sheer arrogance of this guy who thinks just because he has a medical degree, uh you think you're automatically, everyone is wrong because they have a lesser degree than you or a less prestigious position than you, right? um Anyway, so we've crossed swords before. And I quoted I quoted textbooks that show that it said. I mean, he didn't respond to that, but unless he wants to degrade the authors of textbooks, who are numerous authors that have numerous degrees in combat, in some. Um, anyway, what good does it do, to point it out? When someone has that kind of sort of um, ego, I guess. Anyway, so I ask him. Like, so he says this: look, if you diagnose, note what he's accusing me of. If you diagnose based on such flimsy evidence and simultaneously ignore the intentional infliction of horrific fear and anxiety, it's not just that little girl I worry about. Horrific, like clearly, he's an atheist, right? So an angry one at that. I mean, just the word choice, right? You trying to win somebody over? You trying to convince me to come to your side? You're just trying to insult me. Um, who knows? So I say, is it your clinical opinion, doc, that all who are raised with religion have the same reaction described above? I'm not being insulting here. I'm not. My tone isn't um, contrarian. I'm asking for an answer. I want his opinion. I mean, he evades, as you can see. I stated my opinion about your practice of diagnosing based on a snippet of writing. You will likely, speaking of diagnosing, you will likely, he's a prophet too, you continue your attempt to drag me into an entirely different conversation in order to try and divert from that. Well, I pointed out, nobody is diagnosing. Notice my words might have and sounds like. Maybe you should stick with pushing pills, right? So I'm not guilty of being an asshole sometimes. But sometimes people deserve it. Like, come down from your tower, doc. You don't know everything. And I don't know everything, for sure. But that's the whole goal of conversation and debate sometimes, is learn from each other, right? But not if you think you already know everything, like the good doc seems to manifest. So, sounds like I was not committed. I'm not a licensed clinician. I'm not making any diagnosis. I'm just saying it's possible that there are other explanations for what she's writing here other than blaming it on religion and saying it's child abuse. You know? Let's go back down here. Uh huh. You stick with that story. Sounds like you might have the same problem we discussed a long time ago. I said right back at you. Well, I was starting to type here. I wanted to have the last. Well, I already had the last statement, but I also wanted to say he kind of had the last statement because then he laughed at what I said. Right back at you, because I think he remembers my accusation that he probably has terrible bedside manner as a psychiatrist, and he probably has a ton of grievances against him or whatever it was. I still feel that way. I mean, how could you? I mean, I don't know. Unless he's a totally different person in the clinic. I mean, how you talk to people, representing your anyway profession. I guess he's not obviously a psychiatrist in his Facebook profile. You'd have to reveal that to you. But I mean, come on. Our personalities generally are not that different from our professional lives and our personal lives. I mean, there might be some sort of nuance to it, but generally pretty much the same people. Um, what I was typing here was, I was going to be sarcastic and say, well, remind me, doctor, I'm so stupid. Can you direct me to the ICD code for this diagnosis that I gave? Insecure attachment anxious type. You can Google it yourself. Anybody's watching this, Google DSM, which is Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Diseases or Disorders, whichever one. It's from the APA. It's you're not going to find this phrase because this is not a diagnosis. This is an attachment theory that comes from developmental theorists. They're not. It's not meant to be diagnostic. It's meant to describe a pattern of behaviors that result from a pattern of behaviors of the primary caregiver. Um, but what do I know? I only teach this stuff as an adjunct professor at a college. I'm not a psychiatrist who went to medical school to learn the medical model of of psychology or psychiatry, or that perspective, I guess, or modality, depending on how you want to describe it. But anyway, just wanted to vent a little. Took 16 minutes of your time. I'm sorry. I'll just leave it at that, and you can come to whatever conclusions you want, even if you think I was an asshole too. That's fine. We all have our faults and weaknesses. The trick is being able to recognize it and admit it when it happens, right? Or it's brought to your attention. It's going to be tough, but anyway, have a good day or evening for the rest of you, whoever. All right, bye.